Welcome. I'm Lana Heckman Ayers, Managing Editor of MoonPath Press, and I am absolutely delighted for you to be here for the book release reading for Third Class Relics by Scott Dalgarno and Mending Holes by Patrick Dixon. Scott Dalgarno's poems speak of aging, desire, and the breadth of human emotions. Patrick Dixon interweaves tales of his experience of deep sea fishing in Alaska with the rigors of everyday life. Both of these poets reach out to readers with authenticity and generosity. Poetry demonstrates our common humanity and brings us closer together, bridging our differences by demonstrating how much we share the same hopes for ourselves and for our loved ones, how we suffer the same losses and strive to make our lives meaningful. We need these poets and all poetry now more than ever. Our first reader is Scott Dalgarno. Let me tell you a little bit about Scott. Scott Dalgarno finds abundant inspiration from the mystic Julian of Norwich, the poet Elizabeth Bishop, the artistry of John Batiste, and several coastal redwoods in the Bowling Grove. While he writes a lot of prose, he finds that writing poetry can be an out of body experience, occasionally transporting him to a zone where time does not exist and is not age bound. He lives among firs and dogwoods in Lake Oswego, Oregon, where he works for issues of justice. Third Class Relics was a finalist for the 2024 MoonPath Press Sally Albizo Award, and this is his first collection of poems. Scott, please read for us.
Gosh, thank you, Lana. I'm so grateful to you and the press for honoring the book this way. I had no idea publishing a book would mean joining an extended family of writers this way, and it's just so marvelous and humane and wonderful at a time like this. So thank you again. I want to thank Nathan Florence especially for his wonderful art. This is just a lovely painting he once gave me, and I just thought it would be perfect. And he also came up with the most amusing things on the inside. Who's ever seen a donut with a halo before, right? So now I'm enjoying the pure joy of seeing all you dear people who I've known some of you since I was born, dear friends and family from far and near and from so many different decades. It's so humbling. So I want to get right to the reading. I'm going to start with one's called Sacred Relics. This began as a simple poem about young love, and I was struggling with it until I saw a news item from Al Jazeera with a speculation from a Jewish scientist about the circumstances of the death of Jesus. And it turned out to be just the piece I needed to make the poem more than a simple poem about young love. I was slow awakening to so many things: my mother's neurosis, the Soviet threat, God's silence. In Miss Chastain's fifth grade classroom, you said nothing, just unhooked the oval charm from your gosling neck and put it into my hands. The look in your black eyes made holes in me I have yet to fill. Sitting on your porch, under the large plywood hand advertising your mother's skill reading Tarot and palms was all I needed to know of bliss to keep a white-knuckled grip on breathing. Holding your hand, watching as you tucked your tawny feet up under the crimson fringe of your skirt, I would have been content never to rise again. But that summer you moved. I only knew because a podiatrist opened an office in your home, the hand above the door replaced by a swinging foot, your room become a doctor's surgery. Word came today that poor Jesus likely died of a blood clot breaking loose from his mangled hands or feet, stopping his heart. What long haul air travelers may get if they fail to stand and walk about. Pulmonary embolism. Odd to think of Jesus dying of something so pedestrian, so long ago, and yet how palpable the memory of my empty hand, your retreating feet, the ache that makes my later catastrophes pale. The next one is called Angel Pauses, as in an angel pauses before something. It began as an ekphrastic poem about a painting by Vermeer that I saw when I was young at an exhibit. And I worked on it off and on for 6 or 8 years. And then I realized it was actually an Annunciation poem. It took a while for that to click. A poem in which Gabriel uh, is about to communicate to Mary that her life's going to change. Anyway, then I asked myself, how can a man write a poem like this without messing it up? Right? So, Angel pauses. Wanting to know what she knows, he enters the painting. She stands so still, so long, reading a letter by borrowed light. It seems she will read it forever. He hesitates. The reflection of her hair gilding the window brings to mind the Virgin, that and the angle of her head above the paper, like the tilt of lilies in conventional Annunciations. The air is pleasing, cool, the curved lap of snow on the ledge, an amnesty of white. He takes his infinite time. He wants her to overshadow him, overwhelm him. He wants to carry anything she might offer for as long as it might take him to deliver. This next one's called Winter Sunday. Thank you, thank you. In Portland with Franz. And this poem comes from something I misheard on the public address at Powell's Books here in Portland. Um, Donald Trump recently said of Portland, it's like living in hell. And uh, this poem begs to differ. Dreaming I'm the Virgin Mary, I wake in a sweat when Gabriel auditions me for a role in the Nativity. Remembering that Giotto painted angels using sketches he'd made of sheep, I skip Mass and head to my favorite art supply store in the Pearl. Afterwards, I stroll over to Powell's, where I hear my name on public address. Kafka is waiting for you in the rare book room. Famished, Franz and I split a Reuben at Kornblatt's. We discuss snowfall in the city, how one crow and his shadow equal two blackbirds. Passing on dessert, we Ubered a vast forest park to glory in the winter canopy. The emerald damp elevates me. Kafka is a tall man, sitting, his fingers scrape the ground, which, like branches of the avocado, begin to root themselves in the loamy soil. Like my Sheltie resisting a pedicure, my friend withdraws his nails repeatedly, nibbling off the new tendrils. I do my best to pretend I don't see this. You'd expect it of Thoreau, maybe Rachel Carson or Anthony Bourdain, but Kafka? I ask after his fiancée. Which one, he asks. I tell him about my dream and the rude propositions angels are capable of. Franz nods, confessing that sex for him is just as disturbing, that he prefers to pay for it in cash instead of love. I feel like I might make an Oregonian of him until we grab espressos at Stumptown and Kafka sucks his through a cube of brown sugar. Franz Kafka had 4 fiancées simultaneously. This next one, thank you, thank you, thank you. This next one is something really tender. It's one of those poems where the title contributes a whole lot. Um, it it's called "In the Only Tall Grass Left to Mow." Miguel Ignacio naps after taking his lunch. It's May, and he's working ahead of the summer wildfires, ahead of June bugs, ahead of palm trees springing up in Alaska, ahead of the next insurrection, ahead of a mile-wide asteroid, ahead of the big one in California, ahead of the little one his fiance is expecting ahead of his first heart attack, and the second coming ahead of Memorial Day, which will be his last, since on the next, the woman he will never marry will come to the cemetery early with their baby in order to trim the grass around his marker with kitchen scissors, a shallow marker that will say he lived gently, left hardly a mark. This next one is just as tender. This one, however, is based on a true experience that happened something like 40 years ago. Thank you so much. You're so darling to read to. This one's called Bypasses. I thought this to be a drop-off affair, but when reception asks her for her living will, I decide to stay. I cannot remember her name, this quiet, duteous woman who I think of now, like the shy aunt who never quite got to know, who you never quite got to know. We wait in pre-op 3 hours before the surgeon shows up, and I take in the word mercy printed upside down on his head wrap. He repeats what she already knows, that they cannot determine how many bypasses she will require until they open her chest and take a look. He says this without using the word open her chest and makes clear that he has little idea what surgery might buy her. After a silence that stings, she lifts her eyes to ask if she might have a heart transplant. She is aware she is asking for something big. Maybe not the moon, but surely one of the moons of Jupiter. It has so many. He blushes with practiced apologies, and in a moment he's gone. Any hope in the room bleeds out, and I see abandonment beat up on the glossy white wall behind her. She reads this, I think, in my eyes. Smiling crookedly, she says, I got heart lucky once. He was 16, came in my bedroom window, even sang to me. I thought to make him shush, but I couldn't. I actually got a fan letter for that one. It was in the Yale Review a long time ago, and a fan letter one poured in, the only one, but it was cool. Um, this next one's called The Raccoon, once considered solitary, and I got the idea for it one day when I saw a raccoon running. My mother keeps patting my head, offering me her old marmalade cat for company. I remind her that I'm 50. I tell her, Grace, when you have a raccoon, you have everything. Looks like a cat, runs like a dog. She worries because I'm on my own. I remind her that she's single and full of joy. She reminds me that I'm a man. It's different for you, she says, and brings up Arnold, a dreamer who can't tie his own shoes. She's been his flashlight, his parachute, his 911. Arnold's been trying for years to grow squash with barcodes. He's looking to remove the middleman, she says. He's an idiot, I say. A genius, she declares. But you left him, I say, reminding her she's better off without him. When Arnold couldn't find a way to remove the middleman, Grace did. Now that she's become her own best friend, she's angling to be Miss Alabama Nursing Home 2019. Hell, I see her going to nationals. Where's my ambition? I groan. I'm living with my brother. I know a woman at Pet Center where I work who's as lovely as a Mexican guitar, but damn, she says being around me just makes her want a German Shepherd. I hear stirring below me on the linoleum. My raccoon is looking up at me, black eyes shining in the night, a leash in her mouth. I remind her she's a raccoon. She paws at the door. That was entirely fictional. Thanks. Thank you. But this one is about my dad, and it's absolutely my dad. This one's called Small Pleasures, and I have an epigraph for this one. This is beautiful country, was said by John Brown, commenting on the hills of Virginia while he was riding to the gallows sitting on his coffin. My father sits outdoors enjoying an evening breeze off the delta. I see only a red dot, the glow of his cigarette, and wonder if God was taking a cigarette break when a similar breeze wafted across Eden in the early days of creation. Dad's attention is on a portable shortwave, the Marine Channel. Scratchy sounds of men talking to other men about depths, fish, tides. His aluminum chair rocks softly on concrete meant for a gazebo that will never be built. It would hide the stars. The man is happy, knowing how to savor the smallest pleasure. His wife will speak ill of this about him to anyone. Will say that he never does anything large, seldom proposes anything more than a ride in the Dodge on a Sunday afternoon. I've met other men like him, men content with the lot of their cracker barrel lives. I imagine they recognize one another by sight, men who want no more than a simple meal, an afternoon nap, a second cup of coffee. Men who, if they were to be shot at dawn, would savor every puff of a final cigarette, the flash of the match, the soft light of first sun peeking one last time over Ochre Hills. Are we doing okay for time? I'm going to read five unmoorings and a question. Unmoorings meaning things that make us chase us from our moorings. How's that? Pine lid drops. Widow takes an involuntary breath, followed by a sob. Man in Buffalo calls local police. Please, he says, please make the wind stop. Hooded parking meters, a line of sinister monks. Postage mocks you with the word forever. It's like I can't tell if it's dawn or twilight anymore. And finally, the question, when your parents die, I need to know, whose daughter are you? This one's about Miles Davis. All at once, the basement I grew up in is a hospital room. It's larger than that, but there's all the familiar equipment, and Miles is there wearing his shades, Miyake top, and plenty of bling. I remember rumors about him and AIDS, so I'm not surprised by the long tube at his arm and the infuser that hums, beeps, and rolls with him. Miles drinks from a plastic bottle, coughs once, and plays a phrase from time after time, which makes sense because I know he's dead. The phrases keep morphing like everything in this dream, with Miles playing little bits of melody backward or maybe inside out. Between numbers, he's mute, like God, no patter. He makes quirky hand gestures to his bandmates, but the woman I'm with doesn't get it, which disappoints me because she's gorgeous. Critics seldom get him either, and I remember the Manhattan cop who bloodied Miles for insisting he was the headliner at Birdland, not some deadbeat hangabout. Hearing him again, I moved as much by what he leaves out of a tune as by what he plays. He's bent over his horn in a posture of prayer, and I notice the place is full of Hasidic Jews, and I remember Sammy Davis Jr. converted, so why not Miles? The tune is a call and response number. Miles is playing a prose line, and his sax man Kenny Garrett echoes back in poetry. And I see that my date is gone, but I don't care. That's when my dad shows up, like he did to take me home from the spring dance in seventh grade. And I want to hide, but it's my dad, and he bought me my first six string long before I knew the truly unique music of America came out of horns like Miles and Louis, not the hole in the belly of a Martin guitar. I'll close this section with a poem that's just a hoot. Thanks for that. This one's called Puberty in the 1960s. So this is for those who are around my age. The onset of acne, blonde girls obsessed with palominos, boys often bottom feeders, One of them sits behind you in math like a cat napping on a bird cage. The little courage you have, you bought with green stamps. Your mouth sports an appliance that costs more than a refrigerator and isn't that much smaller. Mornings, you say, are for other people. You like several girls desperately. Everything you do around them is like performing a lobotomy on yourself. You and your black-eyed cousin play pretend lovers, holding hands, ramping up passion to an almost kiss, aborted repeatedly by giggles. She asks if cousins can marry. You want to live in such a world, but she longs for something she's seen in black and white between Brando and Eva Marie Saint. Sex is a dirty word. Your parents are rattled by the subject, but ask what you know. This gives you power you gladly trade for knowledge. Your mother worries you're doing something she did at your age. Your father worries that you are not. Wrestling on the wet lawn, you and your cousin are struck by summer lightning. Neither of you is killed, but the soul of one of your kids melts into the shape of lips. Thanks for listening to all of that drivel and fun. Um, I want to pass this over to a poet I like so much as a person and also so much as a poet, Patrick Dixon. Before I read one of his poems, I just want to say what a wonderful storyteller he is, um, what a respecter of the whims of nature he is. Uh, he can make you believe that a boat is his lover, and very genuinely so. He's a very skilled user of language and knows the tools of poetry backwards and forwards. Um, and he makes himself, this is the thing about him that makes him special to me. He makes himself so very vulnerable in so many ways in these poems, especially I think in this poem that speaks of the fact that the kind of fishing that Patrick's done is about life and death. So the poem I'm reading right out of the book is called Payback. There are parts of this I don't talk about, face admit. Sleepless nights, house shuddering in wind before a fish day, eyes open on the ceiling, out the window, wondering beyond bad water, pounding rollers and my own helplessness. Have I done this before? Drowned in a past life? What else explains this loss of rational thought? Payment for mistakes ended underwater? I thought selling out would remedy the fear. It did, but my son goes fishing this spring, and I'm awake in bed again, listening. Thank you. I look forward to Patrick's reading.
That was just beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much for that passionate and fun reading, Scott. And thank you for reading one of Patrick's poems. Your introduction is much better than any I could give, but I'll give you a little bit of the facts about Patrick Dixon. He is a writer and photographer, retired from careers as an educator and commercial fisherman, a member of the board of directors of the Olympia Poetry Network. He has been published in numerous journals and anthologies, including the Washington State Book Award winning anthologies, multiple, Take a Stand, Art Against Hate, published by Raven Chronicles, and I Sing the Salmon Home, published by Empty Bowl Press, two of some of the best Pacific Northwest presses there are. Dixon is a past poetry editor of National Fisherman's Magazine Quarterly called North Pacific Focus and is a member of Fisher Poets. Mending Holes is his first full length collection of poetry. Patrick, please unmute and read for us.
Okay, thank you, Lana, and thank you, Scott. That was really sweet of you and was a great reading. So I'm spreading out uh, my word program so that I can't see myself on Zoom. But I want to start. Scott, you have written so many good poems, but there was one when I read your book. There was one that really spoke to me because it really reminded me of a similar experience, and I think we probably all of us at this age anyway, have had this kind of experience. And so I want to start by reading one of your poems, and it's called Largo. There's your alto on your voicemail. You're dead and sounding quite fine. Well, everything overlaps. Everything bleeds into everything else. Physics and mathematics, chemistry and biology, Bonnie and Clyde. What's life anyway, but a short stay in a quirky motel? Still, they say it takes on average 8 times longer to accomplish anything than you expect. I learned today that ullage is slang for the measure of lack in a wine glass. And I think of you and me and all we discovered together, and I let myself entertain the thought, just for a moment, that we will never see each other again. Oh, I know. Even if we got together now, it would be different. You being, you know, dead. That's the problem with grief. Just when I'm sure it's past, like you, go on, say it, forever. Here it comes again, like Tony Perkins in Drag, that old Hitchcock staccato, stabbing holes in the curtain of my resignation. Every bit as persistent as this pulsing desire that prompts me to keep punching your empty number. Thank you for that, Scott. So yeah, my collection of poetry, Mending Holes, is it was inspired by 20 years of fishing on Cook Inlet up in Alaska. I lived in Kenai for 23 years and fished for 20 of them. I taught in the wintertime and fished in the summer. So what better poem to open a collection of fishing poetry than a blessing for the fishermen? To the gods who do not care, indifferent to our feeble desires, please, just for a moment, listen, calm your waves, unbundle your clouds, hold your winds. Let fish come and let fish go. Let the work tire them, make them ache for home. Above all, spare them, grant them passage, send them back. So there's that. Thank you. This next one I wrote, and when I was writing it, I was thinking about my first day ever fishing on Cook Inlet as a deckhand. And the title of the poem is called Boat Puller. And back in the day, before hydraulics, the skippers hired big, strong deckhands because what you had to do was you had to pull the net on board, full of fish sometimes, by hand. And when you were doing that, you were not so much pulling the net on board as you were pulling the boat, which was floating and lighter, back along the net. And thus you were a boat puller. And my first skipper called all his deckhands boat puller, including me. This is for Jim. We were alone on the boat, a green deckhand and a middle-aged Norwegian, riding emerald rollers, sprinkled with drops of gold in the late afternoon sun. And though you were teaching me how to get a salmon out of the bag without popping the mesh, I was somewhere else. Off the stern, I saw myself, neck deep in Indiana, floundering in all those years of not knowing who I was or how to escape who I had become, drowning in aching nights, spent hoping for the moment I might know a way to set my feet upon a path of my own. While I was picking fish with you, stunned at the sight of the sea so near and the mountains filling the western sky, I thought of dry Midwestern cornfields and of lost empty days filled with a wish to leave, but nowhere to go. You bent over a red to show me how to use a fish pick, never realizing what was happening to me, how you were stripping away the web of my past life, pulling me through to solid ground. So there's that one. And this other one I also wrote, I wrote this for after I was done fishing, and what happened was, like Scott described, my son went fishing again, and in 2015. And so I wrote this for him. It's called Other Fishing Jobs for Dylan, 2015. Tell your daughter you love her. So often she'll remember. Tell your mother, too. Watch the sunrise over the ocean. Notice how slow it goes, how much is packed into the hour before dawn. Do it till you understand what daybreak means. Call home often, even when you're so tired you can't think of anything to say. On the boat, hold on. Keep a firm, conscious grip on the rail. Never trust the sea. Remember each day with your heart, then camera, pen, head. You will only feel like this once. Write letters to your daughter so she'll know what this meant to you, why you left. Mail them when you reach port. Make sure whomever gets them knows to save them for when she's old enough. Thank you. During the pandemic, I wrote a self-published memoir called Waiting to Deliver. And it was kind of the stories behind a lot of the poems in this collection, but it had some poetry in there too. And this is the title piece to that. It's called Waiting to Deliver. On the good day, when boats return home, low in the water, holds full, nets wrapped around salmon rolled on the reel, after picking half the net and laying it back out while fish keep hitting, then running to the other end and doing it again all day long, no time for breaks, a sandwich, or even water. Your face, beard, and glasses streaked black by gurry, dotted white with scales, back aching, fingers and wrists sore. You find energy reserves. Threads of adrenaline buried deep sustain you till you've made the run home and toss a line to the boat you tie behind, the last of a dozen hanging off the port stern next to a matching group tied to the starboard side of the tender, taking fish anchored in the middle of the river. This day of donkey work, this day of absolution, isn't over, won't be for hours. At the back of the queue, you know you'll be here past dinner, past dark, maybe past dawn. You'll eat a baked potato and a red salmon garnished with lemon, onion, and butter less than 2 hours from the time you plucked it alive from the sea. You'll wash it down with a cold beer from the cooler, watch the sunset, and think how this is the best, most complete life you can imagine. Salt air cools as shadows lengthen, and the water changes from blue to black. You trade bunk time with your deckhand and fall asleep before your head hits the pillow. The smack of a boat hook on the bow wakes you both as the next boat in line cuts you all loose to go deliver, and those of you still tethered together like a serpent in the glare of arc lights, work to move up, fighting the current, pulled and yanked off course by boats fore and aft, bumping throttles forward, neutral, reverse, trying not to ram the one ahead of you, hoping the one behind you does the same. Your deckhand fends off as you swing too close to the vessels sleeping to starboard, until the lead boat tosses a line around the tender's cleat again, and you all slide back in the current like a sigh. Engine after engine goes silent. Lines creak around the cleats as they stretch taut. Your crew slips into the bunk while you settle back in the skipper's chair, light a smoke, and sip a cold cup of coffee. You're still waiting, waiting to deliver. Yeah, sometimes when those days happened and they were big days, and all the boats had a thousand or more fish, it would take hours just to unload one boat, and they would usually do it by hand, 100 fish at a time into a net, and then lift that over, dump it out onto the bigger boat, the tender, and it would take you. You might not deliver until after breakfast. So, okay, change pace. This one is for a couple of very good friends of ours, Jeff and Debbie. It's called Overboard. It was a cannery truck, we said afterward. Unreliable. It would stall when he slowed down. He probably coasted through the stop sign. Bone cancer doesn't relent, the doctors told her. Go, live, enjoy the time you have left. For 5 years, she did exactly that. Dove the Great Barrier Reef, went to China, fished the lake behind her cabin with her niece. When she was done, she slipped away overnight. It doesn't take much. A gentle roll of the boat as the wake passes, the brush of an elbow, and the power drill, set too close to the edge, tips and tumbles overboard. You see it roll, watch without moving, frozen in a dream. It doesn't even complete a full circle before it hits the water, that flashlight or 10-inch crescent wrench, or your cell phone slipping out of your pocket as you bend down, in the air before you know it. It lands on the water's surface like you land on the bed after a long day, blankets fluffing, rising as they are displaced, absorbing the impact and falling back again. Only the water receives and moves aside, and your knife, the one you spent all those seasons sharpening, the one you got in France years ago on vacation, a gift from the vendor who loved you were a commercial fisherman and insisted you take it, is suddenly out of reach, beneath the surface, fading, getting smaller and dimmer as it recedes from you and all your memories of it, out of your grasp forever in an instant. Like your friend who tipped over the edge after the struggle to hang on to the rail while the disease rolled under her. Or the buddy who was brushed away in the morning light when a car crested the hill and elbowed him into the air before he knew it. A short fall into deep water. Excuse me for a second. So this is called Farewell, and it's for the Skookum 2, and that's TOO. Skookum Marine built her, and so that's where she got her name, I think. Yeah, I fished this boat for 8 years. So she was my first boat, a jerry-rigged derelict with a sketchy past, perfect for a guy like me. Never built to fish, She was a wooden plug used to make a form for 32-foot fiberglass hulls. But somewhere along the line, the company got greedy and decided to sell her too. Maybe that's where she got her name. By the time I bought her from the cannery, she'd been around the yard more than a few years and looked it. I got a deal, so I thought, because her engine was pulled for a rebuild, and the cannery guaranteed it to be working before the season started. But after dozens of years as a leased boat with no preventative maintenance and decades of fixes addressing symptoms, not causes of bigger issues, I was in for a bouncy ride. Electrical, hydraulic, fuel, steering, every wire, hose, a few planks in the hull, and damn near every bolt would need to be upgraded or replaced over the next 8 years. I was aboard when they installed her engine. I was aboard as engineers hooked up her systems. Sorry. I added a flying bridge, sister ribbed the fish hold, installed a new reel drive, hydraulic motor and hoses, new steering ram and controls, new fuel tanks, filters, and hoses, new stove, new batteries, electronics, wiring, water tank, and hoses. What I didn't know, which was pretty much everything, I learned, not from YouTube or Google, but from old timers, experienced skippers and crew, and fishermen friends who, as a joke, locked me in the lazarette, yet taught me how to tighten the packing on a stuffing box. By the time I sold her to raise cash for a new boat, she'd caught me tons of fish. Ours had become a love-hate affair. We knew each other's strengths and failings. She brought me through storms I didn't think she'd weather. We'd seen each other at our worst and at peaks of fishing proficiency I never thought I'd attain. The guy who bought her fished for a different cannery. Walking the dock in Ninilchik a couple of years later, I recognized her from a distance, like an old lover. But when I got close, I saw her paint was chipped and peeling. Her sides were coated with rust. I rested my hand on her gunwale and apologized. I never saw her again. He ran her on the rocks near the Barren Islands on a halibut trip and left her there. None of us gets to choose how it ends, only how it goes. Yeah. And a lazarette is a compartment under the deck in the stern of the boat where you can access um, the rudder and the controls back there. And I was in there one day, and one of the guys that taught me how to fish came over and put the hatch on and locked it, and then talked with his brother about going to town for coffee. So yeah, and it was a joke. They didn't go. So, and this is the the title piece and the last piece I'll read today, and it's called Mending Holes. And I wrote it as I looked back on 20 years of fishing and all the different things I saw that didn't exist anymore. And so, and this is for Lee, one of the guys I fished with. Mending Holes. I touched the past even as it disappeared before me. I placed my hands upon the backs of ours, loaded heavy with gear, and pushed them down an elevated boardwalk toward oblivion. I mended holes in the days with a needle and twine, swatted mosquitoes like seconds as summer sped beneath me. I painted coats of the present upon planks of history, then years later spent months of chainsaws cutting them into pieces, bulldozing them onto the beach, where I lit the match that burned them to ashes. I even hoisted a beer in their honor. I've seen compasses lose direction, watched a fleet of seasons sink over the horizon, seen sail give way to power, wood give way to glass, Species disappear under thick coats of oil, and lifestyles vanish beneath politicians' dark coats. I pulled decades of tradition onto shore, put them on barrels, and walked away, leaving them to decay. Winter storms weakened them, summer sun bleached them, and I returned years later to feel them crumple between my fingers. What my eyes have forgotten, my hands remember. Cool, wet cotton gloves, stiff, rough manila line, and the heavy chains of anchors covered in generations of mud. I lean into the cool plastic of this buoy. Like seconds into hours, it gives before resisting, and reminds me that ebbing times, with all the gear, work, and fish, are like a boat on a set in a strong tide. From on board, all we see is the set. But from anywhere else, the boat and net grow smaller as they drift into the distance. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for that heartfelt reading. And thanks to both of you for reading one of each other's poems. As a poet myself, it's always sort of, I don't know, educational to hear another poet read your work. I always hear things in that other poet's voice that I didn't know were in the poem. And so thank you for doing that. That's really kind. I promise you in the audience, if you stick around, there'd be another poem from each of our readers to close us out. But right now, I'd like to give folks the opportunity to make any comments or ask any questions you might have. I have to ask you to raise your virtual hands because there's so many of us. I'm not going to be able to see you all. But if somebody sees a hand that I don't see, please tell me. Um, so if anybody has a question or comment for either of our readers, please feel free to unmute and raise your hand, offer. And I'm not seeing any hands yet. I also have a question for readers, so maybe I'll start that off. Um, one thing that I'm curious about, I know both of you maybe touched on it a little bit, but you come from different walks of life. And just how did you happen to find your way into poetry? So just maybe say a little bit more about that if you can, Scott and Patrick.
Yeah. I'm happy to jump in. I remember the very moment that it grabbed me, even though it took a long time for me to get the courage or whatever it took to sit down. But I was an English major. I was taking a class on the poetry of Yeats and Eliot at Gonzaga University, and Professor Franz Schneider wasn't just, a critic, he was a poet himself. I'd never met a poet. And I remember him reading a specific poem of W.B. Yeats called "The Fisherman," which is kind of ironic at this point here, about a man in a gray Connemara coat fly fishing on gray water. But the line that hit me and never would let me go until I started writing was where he says at the end of the poem, oh gosh, it's almost emotional to me. He says, "Before I am old, let me write him one poem, maybe as cold and passionate as the dawn." And, it just comes right up to the edge of sentimentality, but who cares? That's it. That was the moment. And it took me forever to get around to doing it, but boy, it still rings the chime really loudly.
I've interestingly enough, I was an English major as well at Indiana University, and so I was exposed to poetry then. But actually, in high school, I had a wonderful English teacher, about the only class I enjoyed, and she encouraged me just to be a writer, just to write. She liked the way I wrote, and And when I was in college, I spent a lot of time trying to scribble poems that were basically, I called them emotional vomit onto the page because it was mostly about unrequited love, and so it you know it was a struggle then, and I got more serious about it as I got older, and especially once I felt I remember a lot of times sitting in front of a blank page, not knowing what to write about. Well, once you start making your living on the sea, that you learn pretty quickly that there's a lot of things you can write about, from the beauty of it to the danger of it and that kind of thing. And so that's what got me writing more and more, I think, and especially down here after I became part of the Fisher Poets Gathering, and then I got way more serious, and I joined the Olympia Poetry Network, which is a good group of wonderful poets that meet every month and do readings. And so I started getting serious about the craft. And yeah, so that's my brief. Yeah.
Where would any of us be without teachers? I mean, I think we've all had those teachers who just made a difference in our lives, whether it was to encourage us to be writers or just to show us that we had value and meaning in a
Absolutely.
in a way that other people in our lives either didn't or weren't able to. I mean, yes, let's give a great shout out to all the teachers. I mean, I don't think I would have made it out of my 20s without teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just wonderful and exciting to hear the background of both of you. Um, I have kind of a funny question, which you're not prepared for. Is there anything that you want to ask each other right now? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Well, I would just ask Scott, what are you working on next? What's coming next?
Um, Geez, I'm glad you asked that. I wondered if publishing this book might be, like tying a neat bow on top of a long avocation. I've been writing these poems for 20 some years, and be done with it to be a nice finish. But since Lana accepted the book, I've had absolutely nothing but good luck getting new work accepted. Um, in fact, I have 5 poems coming out in the next month in the Iowa Review and the Adroit Review, and a piece of flash fiction that I threw off and it won an international award, except I can't say anything about it because it hasn't been announced yet. So, I mean, this is all ridiculous. I'm the guy who publishes 1 poem a year. And there's just something
Sure.
about maybe MoonPath Press and Lana that's magic. So, yeah, I'm working on actually the poems in the Adroit Journal are 3 translations of an 8th century Chinese poet named Du Fu, and I'm writing a bunch. I know I've got half a book of translations that I want to pair now with my own poems as responses because he wrote in a time when there was chaos, the government was upside down, and people were worried, and I couldn't have picked a poet to translate who's more relevant, and he's 1,300 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, go for it. How about you? I'm
I,
glad to
you know,
ask the same.
I'm working on. I've got a collection, a group of love poems that I'm real interested in possibly doing something with, and then, but I feel more and more compelled to write political poetry about what's happening in our time, and not necessarily shouting it out in people's faces, but writing about putting it together, an extended metaphor or conceit or something that basically is talking about what's going on. And and uh, and I already have a few from the last time we did this for several years ago now, but they still have impact. So maybe I'll do some more of that. Yeah.
Right.
What a great question, and congratulations to both of you, really. I mean, in terms of what you said, Scott, I think I'm just extremely lucky that you offered your collection to MoonPath Press. It is an incredible honor to be your publisher. And it is an incredible honor to be Patrick Dixon's publisher of his first full-length collection. I think I'm the luckiest publisher in the world for that,
Well,
for the honors that I receive from both of you. And in terms of you suddenly getting all these acceptances, Scott, it's just that I caught on a little bit sooner than the rest of the world, but they would have anyway. I promise you that. I know that. I just, it's wonderful. And to
You
hear,
just offer so many people so much encouragement
yep.
that we can't help but want to be as good as you think we are. How's that?
well, I feel that way myself. I feel like I would really be proud of myself as a poet if I could write one book as good as any of the ones I've published with my presses. I mean, that's my goal, to be as good as any of my authors. And I don't know if I ever will be, but you always keep me on my toes. So I appreciate that inspiration.
Well, I know I've told you this in an email before, but I would like to say it in front of all the people that are here listening. Yeah, you are the type of editor that every writer dreams of, and you are so patient and were with me. You were so kind and patient and encouraging that I can't speak more highly. I think you're the best thing since the Italians first sliced bread. But
Well,
you know what I mean. So
well,
I
thank you.
really am grateful
That's
for
so
all you've
kind
done.
of you.
Thank you.
That's so kind of you. I mean, I feel like it makes my life meaningful to do this work. I mean,
Yeah,
this is good work and we need these poems.
yeah.
And if
Thank you.
nobody else has any questions or comments, last chance to raise your hands, then we will go to another poem from each of our wonderful poets before we close. Last chance. Okay. All right. Scott, would you like to read us a poem?
Sure, I've got one more. And I picked a story poem because, in these kind of readings, the story poems, I think, are the ones that people want to hear the most. This one's called Marlene Marlena, 1974. And it's about Marlena Dietrich when she was, like, about 80 years old in San Francisco. I was living in Marin County at the time, and she was appearing in San Francisco. And again, she's probably 80 years old, but this was the Marlena Dietrich that people remembered. So here's the poem. The summer of love is over. AIDS is yet to come. You're in the bar on top of the Mark Hopkins Hotel, and fog surrounds Nob Hill the way white ermine crawls around Marlena Dietrich's shoulders. You're wearing a denim jacket from Goodwill. The maitre d' doesn't like it, but they're not busy, and he lets you sit at the bar. They offer 100 different martinis. You order a beer. It's her last set of a Thursday evening. All sequins, an oval of pink light accents her fur and face and leaves the rest of her to memory. Her whiskey tenor turns the place into a 1920s cabaret. Forget about Liza Minnelli. Marlena's the Blue Angel. She's the dish and the top hat in Morocco. All sex and no gender. You ask the pretty barmaid to deliver a note to her wrapped in a $5 bill. It's a lot of money in 1974. She does and points you out. A lesser artist would think it an insult, but this shimmering thing recognizes you. She's the USO, and you're the soldier she's traveled to the front to entertain. Your note says, "Please sing Lily Marlene, but in German tonight." She looks at you, so remote, so available. She opens her mouth to sing. You're Gary Cooper for a minute. You're even Jean Gabin. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Okay. Um, this one is toward the end of the book, and pretty self-explanatory. Writing about fishing. My eyes burn. I don't want to write about it anymore. I want to fish. I don't want to celebrate beautiful mornings on water-like glass with marks on paper, or wax dramatic on a keyboard about rough weather, surviving despite the odds, all the gods watching, lined up along the shore, taking bets on whether I live or die. I want to wave a fist at them from the bow, defy their wagers in orange rain gear, ride the boat into the teeth of the best they can heave. I want to step onto the dock filled with insolence, a shot of Cuervo in one hand, a belly laugh in the other. I don't want to write about how much I miss the sea when I'm stuck on land, how the smell of salt and a seagull's cry pull an ache out of my chest. I want to set boot to deck and wrench open the door to the great adventure. I'll endure the froth, or else sink like the stone you'll carve my name into on shore, where I find myself forever not wanting to write about it.
Mm,
Mm.
amazing. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Let's celebrate again Patrick Dixon and Scott Dalgarno. And thanks to our audience for being.
Yes.
A poem is only ever truly complete when it has a listener or a reader. Support our poets by getting copies of their books from either the poets themselves or your bookstores, online or brick and mortar. And let's do this again next Sunday, September 21st at 3 p.m. Pacific for a reading by MoonPath Press authors Sean Aveningo Saunders and Marie Marchand, two poets who find solace and beauty everywhere they look. Until next time, may you experience hope renewed each and every morning by nature, by poetry, by the arts, and by one another. Remember, we are all in this together. Bye for now.
Thank you, Lana.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Yes. Peace.